for John to hear his words. Next moment John leapt aside to save his limbs, for Virtue had sent a great boulder rolling down, and as its thunder ceased echoing in the gorge and John looked up again, Virtue had gone over the spur out of sight, and he saw no more of him. John sat down in the desolate place. The grass here was finer and shorter, such grass as sheep love, which grows in the quiet intervals between the rocks. The windings of the gorge had already shut off the sight of Wisdom's Valley, yet I saw that John had no thought save of going back. There was indeed a confusion of shame and sorrow and bewilderment in his mind, but he put it all aside and held fast to his fear of the rocks, and of meeting Virtue, now mad, in some narrow place whence he could not retreat. He thought, "I will sit here and rest till I get my wind, and then I will go back. I must live out the rest of my life as best I can." Then suddenly he heard himself hailed from above. A man was descending where Virtue had gone up. "Hi!" shouted the man. "Your friend has gone on. Surely you will follow him?" "He is mad, sir," said John. "No madder than you, and no saner," said the man. "You will both recover, if only you will keep together." "I cannot get up the rocks," said John. "I will give you a hand," said the man, and he came down till he was within reach of John, and held out his hand, and John grew pale as paper, and nausea came upon him. "It's now or never," said the man. Then John set his teeth, and took the hand that was offered him. He trembled at the very first grip he was made to take, but he could not go back, for they were speedily so high that he dared not attempt the return alone, and what with pushing and pulling, the man got him right up to the top, and there he fell down on his belly in the grass to pant, and to groan at the pain in his chest. When he sat up, the man was gone. 3. John forgets himself. John looked back and turned away with a shudder. All thought of descending again must be put aside at once and forever. "That fellow has left me in a nice fix," he said bitterly. Next he looked ahead. The cliffs still rose high above him and dropped far below him, but there was a ledge on a level with him, a narrow ledge, 10 feet broad at its best and 2 at its worst, winding away along the cliff till it became but a green thread. His heart failed him. "But why does he give me no help? I want help! Help!" Then he gazed up at the cliffs and the narrow sky, blue and remote between them, and he thought of that universal mind, and of the shining tranquillity hidden somewhere behind the colours and the shapes, the pregnant silence under all the sounds, and he thought, if one drop of all that ocean would flow into me now, if I, the mortal, could but realize that I am that, all would be well. I know there is something there. I know the sensuous curtain is not a cheat. In the bitterness of his soul he looked up again, saying, "Help! Help! I want help!" But as soon as the words were out of his mouth, a new fear, far deeper than his fear of the cliffs, sprang at him from the hiding-place, close to the surface where it had lain against this moment. "I have been praying," he said. "It is the landlord under a new name. It is the rules and the black hole and the slavery dressed out in a new fashion to catch me, and I am caught. Who would have thought the old spider's web was so subtle?" But this was insupportable to him, and he said that he had only fallen into a metaphor, and one must use metaphors. The feelings and the imagination needed that support. "The great thing," said John, "is to keep the intellect free from them, to remember that they are metaphors." 4. John finds his voice. He was much comforted by this idea of metaphor, and as he was now also rested, he began his journey along the cliff path with some degree of timid resolution. But it was very dreadful to him in the narrower places, and his courage seemed to him to decrease rather than to grow as he proceeded. He knew now that he was praying. It must become for my imagination not really I, but thou. A metaphor, perhaps more than a metaphor. Of course, there is no need at all to confuse it with the mythical landlord. However I think of it inadequately. Then a new thing happened to John, and he began to sing, and this is as much of his song as I remember from my dream. "He whom I bow to only knows to whom I bow, when I attempt the ineffable name, murmuring thou. All prayers always taken at their word blaspheme, invoking with frail imageries a folklore dream. Take not, O Lord, our literal sense, but in thy great unbroken speech our halting metaphor translate. When he came to think over the words that had gone out of him, he began once more to be afraid of them. Day was declining, and in the narrow chasm it was already almost dark. 5. Food at a cost. For a while he went on cautiously, but he was haunted by a picture in his mind of a place where the path would break off short when it was too dark for him to see, and he would step on air. This fear made him halt, more and more frequently, to examine his ground, and when he went on it was each time more slowly, till at last he came to a standstill. There seemed to be nothing for it but to rest where he was. The night was warm, but he was both hungry and thirsty, and he sat down. It was quite dark now. Then I dreamed that once more a man came to him in the darkness and said, "You must pass the night where you are, but I've brought you a loaf, and if you crawl along the ledge 10 paces more, you will find that a little fall of water comes down the cliff." "Sir," said John, "I do not know your name, and I cannot see your face, but I thank you. Will you not sit down and eat yourself?" "I am full and not hungry," said the man, "and I will pass on. But one word before I go. You cannot have it both ways." "What do you mean, sir?" "Your life has been saved all this day by crying out to something which you call by many names, and you have said to yourself that you used metaphors." "Was I wrong, sir?" "Perhaps not, but you must play fair. If its help is not a metaphor, neither are its commands. If it can answer when you call, then it can speak without your asking. If you can go to it, it can come to you." "I think I see, sir. You mean that I am not my own man. In some sense I have a landlord after all." "Even so. But what is it that dismays you? You heard from wisdom how the rules were yours and not yours. Did you not mean to keep them? And if so, can it scare you to know that there is one who will make you able to keep them?" "Well," said John, "I suppose you have found me out. Perhaps I did not fully mean to keep them, not all, or not all the time. And yet in a way I think I did. It is like a thorn in your finger, sir. You know when you set about taking it out yourself. You mean to get it out. You know it will hurt, and it does hurt, but somehow it is not very serious business. Well, I suppose because you feel that you always could stop if it was very bad. Not that you intend to stop. But it is a very different thing to hold your hand out to a surgeon to be hurt as much as he thinks fit, and at his speed." The man laughed. "I see you understand me very well," he said. "But the great thing is to get the thorn out." And then he went away.
With my soul